Okay, we're doing our cosmetic and topside structural inspection process. The first step we do is the 5 to 10 foot walk around. So we approach the vehicle, stay about 5 to 10 feet away from the vehicle, and what we're looking for here is just any obvious defects. Any damage down low, any damage up high, any panels that might be misaligned, things that you might not see if you were right up on the vehicle. So we just walk around the car slowly, observing top to bottom, looking for anything that catches our eye. If you get right up on top of a car, you miss a lot of things down low. So that's what we're doing. Just observe the vehicle, looking for any signs of previous repair, any existing damage. Once we're done with that, we will begin our actual cosmetic inspection with our senses. We start inspecting a vehicle with our hands and our eyes. We're feeling edges. We're feeling for the smooth ice cube feeling without the coldness. Normally on a painted panel, you'll feel sort of a rough edge. So we're looking and feeling at the same time. Looking at the broad side of the bumper, looking for any debris in the paint, feeling the edges. We always pop our hinged components and lift them, looking at the back side, bolts, looking at our fender valleys. Bolts don't look turned. Valleys are kind of dull. I'll remember that when I look at the other side. Then I go to my hood bolts. Bolts do not look turned. Look around the edge of my hood, looking for any aftermarket stamps, stickers, VIN stickers, anything that might be present or not present to indicate to me that I may have a refinished or replaced hood. Bolts on the other side are not turned as well. Moving to my right fender, I do notice that the bolts are turned. The valley does not look the same as the other side. It's shiny, again with bolts being turned. We'll move back to my other side and double check it. And here I have a valley that's dull on the left side and shiny on the right side. Okay, coming into my hood, feeling the edges. While I'm doing that, I'm taking a look at the finish, see if I see any debris, tightness in the clear. Move to my fender, I do feel a rough edge, which goes right along with the turn bolts and the shiny valley. I'm going to go to my right door, feel my edge, does feel rough, and now I'm looking at my seam sealer. From top, moving towards the bottom. Looking at my hinges while I'm over there for any turn bolts. And I'm going to open my rear door. Feel my edge. Feels rough. And while I'm doing this, I'm going to go ahead and compare seam sealer from the front door to the seam sealer on the rear door. And they do look different. Look at my edge on my quarter panel. Feeling my edges. Again, this is what fine-tunes your skills, getting that feel for paint. Looking at the broad area of the rear bumper for any debris. any imperfections, and also feeling the edge. Looking at the leading edge of my roof, coming back down into the quarter panel, and now I'm going to move to the deck. Again, this is a hinged component that I'm able to look at other things other than just the finish and feeling edges. Looking for any debris in the paint. Now I'm moving to my hinges, looking for any turn marks on my bolts, which could be a good indicator of prior repair or replacement. Bolts look good. Then look at the valleys that the hatch falls into. I can see clear spot welds for my quarter panel, which is a good sign that it's not replaced. They're all in place, and shortly I will compare that to the other side. Valley looks very consistent with the other side. And spot welds are in place. Edge feels smooth. And again, spot welds do match the other side using comparison. While I have the deck open, I also like to look at the rear of the roof, the flange that comes down and welds in, and I'm able to identify the spot welds for the roof, which is a good sign. A replaced roof would not meet our structural guidelines, so this is a very good sign. Moving to the bumper, again, I notice some cosmetic damage, a couple scratches. I need to make a determination on whether I need to call that needs refinishing or not. Moving to my left quarter panel, again, feeling edges for that smooth ice cube feeling. Gun sight in the panel for any debris or imperfections. Opening my door and feeling my quarter panel for any tape lines, any rough edges. Feeling the rear door. And again, looking at the seam sealer. Non-uniform seam sealer could indicate a skin door. I'm going in and looking at my hinge bolts. Any signs of them being turned could give me a clue in my cosmetic inspection. Again, gun sighting the panels, including the door and the quarter panel. Then move to my front door. Again, feeling my edge, searching for that smooth feeling. Looking at my seam sealer. And again, looking at my hinge bolts for any signs of tool marks. Moving to my fender, I will gun sight the front door, rear door, and quarter panel. Looking for any inconsistencies, any debris in the paint. And also check my roof. Feeling the edges along the windshield, roof rails. My cosmetic analysis using a paint meter. I'll turn my meter on. And I will start on the left quarter, in this case, trying to establish a factory baseline on ferrous and non-ferrous metals. My baseline was anywhere from 4 to 5.5. Systematically, I will move through the car, looking for any deviations in paint meter readings. Because I did my cosmetic analysis first using my senses, I have a good idea of what may be painted, repainted, or replaced. I'm using my meter to confirm that. Looking for consistent readings throughout the vehicle. Coming in to meter my fender, keeping in mind that I do have turn bolts and a rough edge, and I am above baseline. My determination on this fender is it has been refinished. Getting ready to move to the door, and keeping in mind that it does have a rough edge. The seam sealer did not look consistent, and it is metering in baseline, which confirms to me that the door has been skinned. If I was only going by a meter, I would have gone by this door thinking it was original. The rear door did have a rough edge, and it is metering high, indicating to me that the rear door has been refinished. Quarter panel felt good and is in factory baseline. Got a factory quarter panel. Maybe do my roof rail. All within baseline with good smooth edges, as well as the roof. Just to reiterate, the front door did have a rough edge. Seam sealer did not look consistent, and it was metering in factory baseline. There's no doubt that this front door has been skinned. And again, looking at that seam sealer, which does not match the rear door, you can clearly see right there is very inconsistent with the rear door. Along with my other senses of knowing it had a rough edge, seam sealer didn't match, and then my meter to confirm it being in baseline. Just do one more check. I'm going to walk around. I'm going to look at this door, left front door, and check that seam sealer again. And as you can see, it's got a clean bead up at the top and flowing all the way down to the bottom of the door. My suspicions are correct. It's got a skinned front door. And then moving to my hatch, edges felt good, nice and smooth. Metering right in factory baseline, using my meter as my last tool. Everything looks good there. Left quarter panel, edges were good, nice and smooth, and metering right in factory baseline along with my roof rail. All right, so now we're starting our topside structural inspection with number one of the Fantastic Four, which is under hood. First and foremost, we need to identify whether we need to remove an underhood cover or not. In this case, we do. So I'll pull that off and I'll stick it under the car, and you can see clearly how much more visibility that this gives you. All right, so coming into number one, the first thing I'm going to look at is I'm going to look down into the area where I just removed the cover, and clearly I can see the reinforcement. Reinforcement right here. Reinforcement looks good. I'm looking at my upper tie bar of my core support all through here for any damage, any signs of repair. I'm looking over here at my upper tie bar as well, and I'm identifying that it is a welded in core support into the apron, and it is factory. While I'm here, I'm looking down at my frame rail running from front to the back to the firewall. I'm inspecting that. I'm inspecting my apron. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to inspect this full apron down here now, running from the rail all the way up to the upper apron rail, back through here, upper apron rail, hand laid seam sealer, looking through, everything looks good, into my strut tower, factory spot welds on my strut tower. Remember, comparison is your best friend. Flowing around to anything I can see on the firewall, which is tough to see with all the insulation. I'm looking down below, which is going to be hard for you to see right now, but I'm looking at my cross member down below the engine. It's actually an engine cradle, which in our world is a cross member. I'm looking at that way down here. Hard to see with the camera, but it's down here. I've also got another cross member, which is part of the engine cradle, up here that I've inspected. Once I feel good here, factory spot weld, seam sealers consistent throughout both sides, I move along my firewall. Anything that I can see through this insulation, any holes might have in the insulation that I can see, no turn bolts, looking for any non-factory wires coming through, and I end up back over here at this strut tower. I see factory spot welds like I do on the other strut tower. I'm looking down at my rail. Hard to identify on camera, but I am looking down on my rail, following it forward as far as I can, and I'm back. Looks good. Now I'm going to flow into this apron. Apron looks good. Coming up into my strut tower, back down my upper apron rail, and I've come across this weld flange of the upper tie bar on this side, and it is factory. Now I'm flowing through the upper tie bar, inspecting upper tie bar, back to where I started. Once I feel good, I'm done with number one. Number two, left side door opening structural inspection. With my door open, I'm doing a visual inspection of my A-pillar. Moving down, pulling my rubber, looking at my spot welds. Moving into my sill, no apparent damage. B-pillar, rocker to roof, and looking at my factory spot welds, which are in place. Once I feel okay with my visual inspection, I'm going to start metering my jams. A vital step to every inspection. Jams typically are going to measure lower than the outside of the vehicle. Moving into my B-pillar. Looking good. Moving into my rear door opening. Visual inspection. Backside of my B-pillar. Looking at my factory spot welds. Looks good. Moving into my sill. No damage. Everything looks good. And my C-pillar. Pulling my rubber on my C-pillar and looking at my factory spot welds. I'll now take my meter and I will meter my jam. Again, a vital step to every inspection. And metering lower than the outside of the car. Going into my B-pillar. And everything so far is looking good. Number 3 of the Fantastic Four, the trunk area structural inspection. So I approach my trunk area. I'm looking at my D-pillars, taking a look at my valleys. Spot welds look good. I'll go ahead and meter, matching up with the jams, and I'll move to the right side. Again, spot welds, valleys, and metering, and everything matches up. Now we'll be moving on to the process for inspecting vehicles with bolt-on plastic covers that are not removable for inspection. Okay, so we're back. We now need to inspect the rear body panel of this vehicle, the wheel houses of this vehicle, and the trunk pan of this vehicle. Unfortunately, we've got this hard plastic covering here, which makes it tough to get into without pulling all of this apart. Now, based on your paint work, that might dictate whether you need to do that or not. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go under the vehicle. So if we'll go under the vehicle now, we'll kind of point out what we're looking at. So while I'm under here, I'm going to go ahead and look at my rear body panel weld flange, which is right here. That welds into my trunk pan. While I'm under here, I'm going to go ahead and take a look. Let's take a look at our rails. Take a look at a cross member, our extensions, our reinforcement. And then let's also look back as far as we can. Tough to see in this from this angle, but I'm looking at the wheel houses where they connect to the trunk pan. I want to take a look back here too. Now remember, I've already been on my quarter panel and metered it, and I've noted whether I've got Bondo or repair on that quarter, which could indicate wheelhouse damage. But take a look here, then we slide to the other side, and we're going to do the same thing. But this is the big deal here. This weld flange here looks great. I can see the factory spot welds in place. Factory rear body panel. My trunk pan looks really good based on what I can see. My rails, my cross member, and remember, I'll do this on both sides. So this is the procedure when you can't look at these things from the top side of the vehicle due to plastic, having to remove heavy plastic and unbolting things come under the car. Now we'll move into the process for inspecting vehicles from inside the trunk compartment with removable covers. Okay, so here we are on the rear section of a vehicle that we are able to see from the top side. If I get you to move closer, we'll look in here. So what we're inspecting here is we're looking at our trunk pan. We're looking at our rear body panel, seam sealer. Everything looks uniform in here, matches the trunk pan. I'll do my inspection here. I will pull back this insulation and I'm going to look at my wheelhouse, look at my back of my quarter panel, look for any indicators of any repair or damage I might have missed. So I'll look through here. I'm going to get up in here and okay. Another component we inspect is what we call the parcel tray or parcel shelf. We're looking up in here for any cuts, any tears, any holes drilled, which we would refer to our PDR guidelines, any modifications to put new speakers in, but we're going all the way across, inspecting our whole parcel shelf, all the way to both wheelhouses. Once we feel good about that, we've inspected our rear section and move on to number 4. Now we're moving into number 4, the Fantastic 4, right side door opening structural inspection. Mimics the left side door openings. I'll move into my C-pillar and I'll inspect, looking for any damage, any signs of any paint, looking at my factory spot welds on my weld flange, my rocker sill, and moving into my B-pillar. And again, checking the spot welds on the weld flange. Now I'll bring my meter in, and again, I'm looking for that lower baseline than the outside of the car, and that's what I'm getting. Looking good. Moving to my front door openings. B-pillar again. Very consistent throughout the door jamb. Checking my spot welds. Weld flange looks good. And moving into my sill. And A-pillar, visually everything looks good. Look at my spot welds on my A-pillar. And I'm ready to... Meter is a very good tool to check jams, to find damage that you might not otherwise see. And once you're through metering, that will conclude the Fantastic 4 topside structural inspection. And this concludes the brief overview of the TRUE frame topside, cosmetic, and structural process. Thank you.